Welcome to the first edition of the AFL Redraftables. Today we are going to look back at the most famous of AFL drafts, the 2001, also known as the Super Draft, headed by Luke Hodge, Luke Ball, and Chris Judd. The picks and the stories of this draft continue to reverberate around the AFL, and its effects are still felt today. We'll be joined today by my fellow co-analysts, Josh Kaplan and Dr. David Blusztein, and we're going to look back at not just the picks and the stories themselves, but how this draft reshaped the AFL moving forward. But first, a word from our sponsors, Town Basic. Town Basic is your modern day IKEA. Go out there and find your products, your household goods to make everything within your home more easily, more lovely, and yet an affordable price. Please visit townbasic.com or contact the CEO himself, Mr. Philip Ween. Welcome. So we're being joined now by Josh Kaplan.
King Shafir, what a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Are we waiting for Mr. Smug? Has he entered the waiting room at the very least? I think he may have.
Mr. David Blusztein is joining the call. Now, the reason why I've invited Mr. Josh Kaplan here is not only is he an expert in 90s and early 2000 football, but Mr. Josh Kaplan really understands the nature of the draft and the value of a draft pick versus the value of a player. And so we don't just have an amazing draft class here today. We also have a few really interesting and delicate trades that happened right before the draft that meant that some of these players were available. Now, welcome, Dr. David Blusztein. How are you?
Fellas, it's great to be here. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Dave, you are coming in loud and clear, and I must apologise. I missed your call earlier. I was dropping bagels at my parents'. And I've literally I came home at 2:25 to read the draft. And what I can't get over is the depth in the rookie draft this year. Have you guys? Have we ever seen such depth?
Can I just interject before we get too serious here? We talk about being in equilibrium, and I must say our hair at the moment is the perfect equilibrium. I am overflowing. I am really struggling in this current plight. And Z is just rocking this beautiful showdown look.
I have never seen so much hair. Can you look at Blusztein's hair?
This is.
I've never seen anything like this.
If Blusztein's hair was the cure for Corona, well, we'd be.
I've never seen it like that, Dave.
But if we can now get on topic, I do agree, Josh. I think the entire 2001. Off season, we'll call it, is quite interesting, and I don't know when you want to have a Trent Henschel tribute moment, but he was part of the 2001 rookie draft, I believe. Bones,
he
was.
Can you
correct me?
He was.
And let's just have a word.
So just so we're clear, 2001. Just making sure, Shaq, we're doing 2013. Is that right, or 2001?
2001. We'll definitely get to the
we're doing 2001. Okay.
We'll get to the Crips draft in 2013 in the coming weeks. Perhaps let's look back.
I was under the impression we're doing 2013. So let me now I'll
recalibrate your research.
My list. I will, and it shouldn't take me too long because I have done
at this point. Whilst Josh, I'll buffer you some time here. Jono, can you just elaborate on some basic rules, the premise behind redrafting? What are the focuses in how we pick our picks? Is it purely just ability, career? Is it longevity? Is it position? Give me something. Premierships,
it definitely does need to take into consideration everything. When I look back at a redraft, of course, the breadth of career, the All-Australians, the best and fairest, the Brownlows, the Lee Matthews trophies, whatever you may call it. I definitely take that into consideration. Also positional because, if you're able to get a star ruckman or a star full forward, which, they don't grow on trees, maybe that does add a half notch to a person's value over a career, maybe then an extra 20 games at a meaningless club or something like that. And yeah, I mean, looking back to this 2001 draft, there currently is only one active player. Can we all guess who that is?
Ablett, I think.
It is Gary Ablett Jr.
Yeah.
It is. So it's funny looking back at some of these names because some of them are still in the league only just a year or two ago, and it's pretty crazy to think the longevity of this cohort.
Yeah, are we doing it also on the assumption that it's just purely on a best player basis, not on any needs? We're not pretending we're list managers of any particular club. It's just purely best players. Well,
actually, Terry Wallace is just joining us right about now.
Yeah. I had him on standby for all list management related decisions. If you'd like to draft on position, once again, it is your list. It is how you wish to draft a particular player. We will go in a snake order, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 type of thing. But maybe if I share just a couple of facts about this draft class, just to put into context the amazingness of this particular draft.
I have a quiz question after that, Bones.
Yeah, sure. Can anyone guess how many total premierships were won in this draft class?
That's a very hard question. I'm going to say maybe 22.
31.
The answer is 39.
Oh.
39 premiership medallions were collected in this entire draft class. Now, would anyone like to care the amount of total All-Australian nominations in this particular draft class?
Someone's done some homework.
There must be over 70.
I'm going to say 124.
Okay. The number is 50.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, looking back, it's quite amazing when you think of some of these star players, and then you only realize that, a Luke Hodge only made 3 All-Australians in his career, whilst, Gary Ablett and Chris Judd made 8 and 6 respectively. But there are some players that are more geared towards All-Australian selection, even though maybe their impact is
Let's
not.
be honest.
Just so we're all being just so we do this all in a fair and equitable manner. Do we put aside the fact that Mick Martin's the universal number 1?
Oh well, I had him picked 2 behind Trent Henschel, of course.
Because Mick Martin was taken by Carlton at pick 61.
Do we want to explore the trade and recycle period of this before we go into it? Because
absolutely,
it was a fascinating time by the Carlton Football Club, particularly.
I mean, well, let's go back. I mean, Carlton actually it didn't impact the draft too much in terms of the players that were selected. But this is right off the back of Carlton being eliminated by Richmond in the semi-final. I think everyone recalls that as the Cooter game where he goes down a little bit injured.
He did his knee.
He did his knee. And in the off-season, this is before this salary cap crisis actually hit Carlton. And so everyone was kind of expecting 2002 to still be a somewhat formidable Carlton team. So the list manager at the time went all in. Now, we all remember the Corey McCurtain, Mark Porter trade, but there were actually a couple of draft picks associated with that. Carlton actually on top of adding Mark Porter to the Corey McCurtain trade, gave away its first and second round pick 14 and pick 30. Now, those draft players didn't amount to anything in particular. In fact, one of them's name is Ashley Watson, and the other one is Rod Crowe. I believe they played about 20 games between them. So I'm not too sure if Carlton, missed out too much there, but the trend potential of what those picks could have been is rather interesting. Now
Justin Murphy? Did we take Justin Murphy back from Geelong for pick 23? I'm pretty sure we did.
believe that's the case. Yes, that's
I've never. Has there ever been? I've never seen anything more abhorrent than Carlton's list management that year. Like Andrew Eccles, David Gallagher, Corey McKernan was picked up for Mark Porter, and as you rightly point out, picked 14 and 30. Justin Murphy, who we traded to Geelong, we picked back up from Geelong for pick 23.
Yeah,
we got this. We got Lindsay Smith for pick 61. Not only did we go all in, we obliterated our list.
There's got to be an element of, well, Kuta beat the Bombers in 99, so who cares? Like, after that, it's just a bit of fun, yeah? Like, we've already won, beaten the house.
I think they were honestly...
We can say that, but and I don't know if you have them on your draft board, but Carlton actually did all right from a draft perspective. So, yes, Jared Waite was a father-son selection, but if you go to the rookie... actually... If you go to the rookie draft, they're able to snag up Brett Thornton, who had a very serviceable career for Carlton as a fullback.
It was quite a handy play. If I can, go on.
And Andrew Carazzo was selected, but actually selected by Geelong. One of the more forgotten players in that Geelong super team. He couldn't get a game, and then Carlton were able to swoop a couple of years later in the rookie draft in 2003.
It's actually funny. You're right. It's funny to think that if you look at our actual net gains from 2001. Putting aside the abomination at the trade period, we got Carazzo, Jared Waite, Brett Thornton, who all played over 200 games or close to. I mean, that's not bad. That's not a bad return.
That's a very good return.
But it's almost like it fell into our... It wasn't through design, put it that way.
On a similar topic, I mean, Essendon were about to lose a lot of senior core players the following year, but moving on, Damien Hardwick was a big moment, and if I can convey a personal story, I lived around the corner from Damien Hardwick at the time.
I believe he was in Saturn Grove from memory.
One of them, and actually wrote him a handwritten letter and put it in his letterbox saying how upset I was that we'd traded him on. And a week later, he went to McDonald's with his kids, and my sister served him, and she mentioned that I dropped the letter, and he's like, "Oh, I read that," and was very upset to read that. But he wasn't a happy man to move on, and went on to another premiership. So, what could have been for the Bombers with a few of those senior guys hanging around a bit longer.
Quick question.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. Who do you think's had the more illustrious multi-team career, Damien Hardwick or Blake Caracella? Both two-time premiership players at two different clubs. I guess
Hardwick created something that grew into a premiership team. Caracella really just jumped on to a top team at the time.
Also a premiership assistant coach
Hardwick's
at
also
Geelong, though.
How good was Caracella? I always remember Hardwick was an absolute gun. Was Caracella? Was he like a Scott Camporeale ceiling?
I think we'll discuss these sorts of players. Like, how good was James Kelly and Lee Montagna? Like, I feel like they have of a similar ilk in this draft, and it's very hard to value them in an average to below average team.
So I'm glad you mentioned.
Before we get into that, I did have one trivia question about your stats in this draft. There was one player that won multiple premierships in this draft that did not play for Hawthorn or Geelong. Can you name them?
I can, but I'll throw it off to
one player won multiple premierships that didn't play for Hawthorn or Geelong. It wouldn't be Dane Swan.
No, I think he only won one. He's known for three initials.
Lewis Roberts. It's not LRT, is it?
It is LRT.
How many multiple?
He played in both Sydney premierships. He did. That's an amazing trivia.
What a long career.
I feel like there weren't many that made the two Sydney teams, but he was from the 01 vintage and does that. And one other very, very interesting fact before we get into this draft is I don't remember many years there being 3 priority picks. But of all the drafts, for there to be 3 priority picks, oh wow, what a game changer that is.
So it's crazy, and I'm glad you mentioned James Kelly. I think we could save it for the actual James Kelly pick if someone is to take him in the top 15. But maybe if I tell you the James Kelly trade. So if we look back, he originally drafted at pick 17 in this draft. And that pick prior to the draft, or prior to the trade period at least, is held by Richmond. Why? Because they finished third in the home and away season, so that they inherited the 17th pick in the draft. Let me read you the series of trades. We always talk about, in the last couple of years, all the picks that get untraded, and it's really hard to follow who the pick was or who it originated from. James Kelly, this is how we got from Richmond to Geelong. So Richmond had the pick 17. He was traded from Richmond to Sydney. The pick was traded along with Nick Daffy for Greg Stafford.
Great hair.
So Nick Daffy and pick 17 went to Sydney for Greg Stafford. Gets better. Sydney on-trades the pick 17 with pick 13, who ended up becoming Nick Del Santo, and pick 45 for Barry Hall. So Barry Hall netted two players that included James Kelly and Nick Del Santo, but St Kilda weren't done. Picks. They on-traded that pick, so the pick 17, to Fremantle for Heath Black. And then Fremantle on-trades that pick to Melbourne for Jeff Farmer. So now Melbourne has the pick, and they trade the pick, so pick 17 and pick 41, who turned into Henry Playfair, to Geelong for Clint Bizzle. So this is how...
More.
What?
That's amazing.
It went from Richmond to Sydney to St Kilda to Fremantle to Melbourne to Geelong.
There were some good trades in that period. I mean, Clint Bizzle had a very good career at his second club. Fremantle inherited a few good players in that period.
Yeah. Well, we know without drawing to the. So I know that it's a very famous trade as well in terms of how Hawthorn received the first pick. Does anyone recall what that trade was? And then maybe
Trent Crode, wasn't it? Or was it McFarlane and Crode?
McFarlane and Crode for picks 1, 20, and 36. So we know pick 1 was Luke Hodge. I'll elaborate that pick 36 turned into Sam Mitchell. So Fremantle are really in the rough there for a 2-year rental of Trent Crode. Does anyone remember how many games pick 20 played for Hawthorn? Sandwiched in between two premiership captains.
No idea.
I wouldn't say many.
The answer is 0.
0.
I'll take it. Hawthorn are happy.
So they picked up Luke Hodge, Sam Mitchell, and Daniel Elstone.
Unbelievable. There's also just looking through the list just before we get on to the actual picks. There's some pretty big misses in the top 10, and considering how good the draft was.
Name them.
You look at guys like the absolute bombs where you'd call Graham Pollack a bomb. I know he got hit by a tram, but regardless, he never really fulfilled his potential. Xavier Clark, bomb, pick 5.
Bomb.
Graham Pollack was 4. Xavier Clark 5. Ashley Sampi. Again, flashy, but I mean, how big a career would you? I mean, he wouldn't make my top 15 in the redraft.
No way.
No. And then you've got Luke Molan at pick 9 and Sam Power at pick 10. So 5 of the top 10 picks that the clubs picked were massive misses.
So how would you rate this how would you rate this from a crapshoot perspective, Zell? From 1 being that not at all, and 10 being this is a complete crapshoot draft. How would you rate it?
Well, I think this is probably more evidence of the clubs at the time not having any semblance of idea as to what goes into drafts. I remember this was still 20 years ago, we have to remember. So a lot's changed, you'd think, since then, and their analytics have improved. Questionable how much they have improved, but you'd say they have improved to some extent. But
look, the counter argument is Pollack, Clark, Sampi showed enough early on, so you can't be too critical of recruiters in that regard. They just didn't develop to the level that the other guys did, I think.
Yeah. All right.
Excellent.
Well, should we get cracking?
Yeah, I'll pass to Zell. I'll let you have the first pick if you wish, Josh. And so we'll do Josh, David, myself, and we can just do that same order: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So, but I'm very curious
my first
as to.
Pick, yeah, my first pick. Now, look, this is obviously the. I've been agonising over this since the draft was done, and there's obviously the big three. Ablett, Judd, and Hodge, who all come directly into calculations here. Fortunately, the three of us seeing the careers of all three of those players from first game to last game, and they all bring such different skill sets, don't they? I mean, I think Judd's proven to be both a beast inside and obviously in his early career how good he was outside. Didn't have the skill of Ablett. Ablett also was inside and outside, but Ablett was unbelievably skillful and also much more of an accumulator than Judd probably was. And then you look at Hodge, who's just pure leadership and just could turn a game.
I'm going to stop you there. Bones,
Yeah.
Did you have the same top three?
As Ablett,
Judd, Hodge. I did not.
I'm waiting for Zellman though. He hasn't announced. He might say three, but he might come in and say Ashley Sampi. I never quite gave up on him.
So my top three, they were clearly my top three, and I've been splitting hairs. There's not many hairs between Judd and Ablett. But I think for pick one, if you're building a team for pick one, I couldn't go past Hodge. He was everything I wanted. And again, this is coming from a Carlton supporter. Hodge was a cultural, he changed cultures. He's the type of person that you build a team around. He's uncompromising. He's unbelievably skillful. And in big moments, I could not have, he was the player that just knew how to read the game and just insert himself into the positions to make a difference at all those opportunities. And obviously, Judd has got a history of doing that as well, and Ablett too. But I think Hodge, just for that gilt-edged, as that competitiveness that he brought, and the fact that he actually transformed a culture. Now, Juddy, I love him, but he came to Carlton and he still, the culture was still, very much reliant on him. I think Hodge, obviously together with the leaders at Hawthorn at the time, were able to he picked up that club on his back and transformed Hawthorn. So for me, for pick one, I'm going Hodge.
Hodge. No, I think it's a great pick. I too was agonising at whether to put Hodge number one. Interestingly, that he's played the exact same amount of games as Gary Ablett right now. Just to read out a few facts: 346 games for Luke Hodge, 194 goals, 4 premierships, 3 as captain, just 3 All-Australian selections, just 2 best and fairests, career possessions of 22 per game, and 2 Norm Smiths. But yeah, I agree. I think it's...
That's where I completely disagree. Stellar career, very good player. But why was he only winning 2 best and fairest and 3 All-Australians? Sure, big game player, can't doubt him, great leader. But was he actually the best player on the ground a lot of times throughout a season? And was he even the best player in his team? No way. I had Sam Mitchell ahead of him.
Really? Wow.
Hodge would have fallen to pick 5 on my list.
Wow. Wow.
Jeez.
I think we just found ourselves with the new Velvet Sledgehammer there, Josh.
Now, we also have to remember, Dave, that Hodge went to Brisbane, who also similarly were struggling under the weight of a lackluster culture at best.
Is this the best captain draft?
No, well, it's the best overall player draft. And I think that the fact that he transformed cultures of football clubs is testament to him being pick one. And also just I can't fault his game. I mean, he was incredibly tough. He was huge in big moments.
Of course. I'm being a bit cynical in that reply, but I genuinely have I have 4 players who I believe were the best players on the ground more often than he was, and they therefore should be drafted ahead of him, in my opinion.
Very
I think
fair.
a lot of that also stemmed from where Hodge played. I mean, Hodge didn't play most of the time in the middle, did he? I mean, he was more like the behind the ball, and I think that he certainly could have been.
I think before we move through the draft, Schaefer, who would you have taken at 1?
I had Gary Ablett as my number 1.
As did I, Gary Ablett.
Only because I think what gets lost is I'll let Dave make the case. I presume you'll take Gary Ablett as your number 2 pick then.
Yeah, so my agonising decision was Ablett or Judd. I think they're both the best players of our generation. I just feel when we look back at things, Judd's window was a bit shorter, and probably even match to match wasn't doing it as often as Gary Ablett has, and in some ways still is. I mean, I feel he can't quite get through the season at the moment, but he truly is pretty much near best on ground every game he plays for a 10, 12-year period in 2 very different clubs. And certainly durability was never an issue. Consistency was never an issue. Kicks goals, plays on the big stage. So I'll have Gary Ablett number 2 every day.
I mean, it's quite remarkable because if you look back at Gary Ablett's career, it probably only really took off in that first premiership season. He was from 2002 to 2006. It's kind of just this like nifty forward, pocket half forward. I don't think anyone really saw him blossoming into this multi All-Australian midfielder. Just a couple of quick facts.
I also remember the other knock. Yeah, the other knock on Ablett was even when he was in his so-called prime, he was very much an accumulator. I mean, and I think he'd be the guy that he'd get 35 touches. I remember when we were all involved in fantasy, like we were amazed at just how much of the ball he had. But I think the impact question for me, and that's where I landed on Judd over Ablett. I think overall impact on games, I'd just take Judd. Both obviously phenomenal footballers, but
I think
Ablett,
if Judd's peak 6 or 7 years went a bit longer, he goes ahead of Ablett.
Yeah,
I think Judd's peak is the best of the draft lot. I think him at his best, he probably trumps Ablett. Even though Ablett, you don't really see Judd's stat lines of 40 posies, 4 goals, and you see that quite frequently with Gary Ablett. I do think Judd's impact on a game is probably a smidge higher than Gary Ablett's. But the fact that he's probably done this for what works out to be about 70 more games than Chris Judd, you might need to give him the nod. He did win 5 Lee Matthews trophies, something that I probably value a bit higher than the Brownlow. I was going back through this. Sorry?
Ablett did.
Who did?
Gary Ablett. That's 5 times his fellow peers have said he's the best player in the league. And you've got to remember that only starts in 2007.
He's the best field kick I've ever seen in terms of delivery inside 50 to a leading target, etc. And he kicks goals routinely that even the other best players routinely miss, and they're the big moments he really does deliver more so
and
than
I think
Judd.
The knock on Judd was that he probably didn't kick anywhere near as many goals as Ablett, and I think Ablett beats him hands down for disposal, but
they're different players.
Yeah,
I think without going back too far into the history books, I think 2 of Gary Ablett's most famous games are probably in defeat. Was probably that 2010 preliminary final where it really just seemed like Geelong went into their shell and Collingwood steamrolled them, and Gary Ablett was the only one in the first half that stood up and tried to at least get some forward momentum. Then also the 2008 grand final, I think he was Geelong's best player by far. And when Geelong forwards couldn't hit a target, he was the only one getting a lot of inside 50s. If those 2 games go differently, you might be looking at Gary Ablett as possibly even the greatest of all time, but it's just, it's still just 2 premierships to his name. But yeah, I don't think you can go. 3-time leading club goal kicker.
3 premierships?
No. He was at Gold Coast for the Geelong.
Very good. Very good. Forgotten
So
facts.
wow, we got
You're on the clock, Bones.
I'm on the clock now. It's funny. I think I need to call an audible just from this conversation. I originally had Sam Mitchell at pick 3, but just hearing Josh's arguments about Chris Judd, I think, look, all stats will say Sam Mitchell should go higher. I mean, the guy's a 4-time premiership player, premiership captain as well, 3 All-Australians and 5 best and fairest in that run, including a JJ Ellison trophy and a VFL premiership as well. And a Brownlow. Everyone forgets that now. Sam Mitchell's a Brownlow medalist. I will, going into my research, because I was debating whether to put Judd or Mitchell at pick 3 here. I think something that counts against Mitchell is once again, everyone will forget these things, but 2 of his less performing games is the 2008 grand final. Even though it was a win, he just had just the 13 possessions and it was really a no-show in that particular game. And also in the 2013 win, just the 12 possessions. I mean, of course, he did make up for it with 2 stellar performances in the 2014 and 2015 grand final. But he was an amazing accumulator, amazing tough player, a guy that just managed to get 25 a game, even in his thing. But I think you got to give the nudge. I think you have to give it to Judd. I mean, if Carlton was a slightly better team during that 08 to 2013 run he had, you'd think he might have another Brownlow medal next to his name. He might have another All-Australian next to his name. His best and fairest is also at 5 for Chris Judd. And that includes being 2 in that amazing West Coast run. I think it's just
he carried us.
That first 2 seasons of 08 and 09. I know he won the Brownlow in 2010, but that first 2 seasons he had at Carlton, it was just like going to the football. And he was injured. He came off that groin injury or something like that when he first came in.
Yeah. A pleasure to watch. A real pleasure.
Yeah, and he started out as an outside midfielder, as this kind of classic wingman at West Coast. He bulked up. I remember that one preseason he put on something like 4 muscles just in his glutes or something like that. I was thinking, how do you actually do that? And yeah, I mean, Carlton's midfield at that time was young. The Murphy, Gibbs, Stevens, Hadley, whatever. But he carried that team from nothing to making finals 3 consecutive years. I think you need to give it to Chris Judd here. So that's my case for Chris Judd at pick 3.
All right.
Yeah.
So pick 4. So we've got the top 3 so far: Hodge, Ablett, Judd in 3. Pick 4. I understand that the 2 of you are probably would go with Mitchell at 4. Is that right?
I had him at 3. Yeah, Sam Mitchell.
I'm really curious. Who does Blusztein have at 2 then? Did he have Chris Judd?
Judd at 2. Yeah.
Judd at 2. So Ablett has 4. Oh no, you had Ablett, Judd. Okay.
Ablett, Judd, Mitchell.
Yeah, Luke Hodges.
So I've got my
Blusztein
4.
Slider. Yep.
My 4, I've gone Jimmy Bartell.
Wow. Okay, make the case.
Jimmy Bartell was the most beautiful footballer I've ever seen play, and I've watched his whole career. He was magic. He actually did not have one weakness in his game. He was unbelievable kick, unbelievably tough. You could play him forward. He was an amazing mark above his head for his size. Amazing kick for goal. He was probably Geelong's best midfielder when they were, him and Ablett, when they were in their premiership era. He was also so clutch. I love the leadership. I love the clutch. I love the clutch gene, which he clearly had, and I love the flexibility. And him and Hodge as my 2 picks give me both of those.
He probably is more clutch than any star I can remember in recent time. I'll give him that.
And I think the clutchness, name one big game where Bartell didn't play well. I can't think of any. And he played in heaps of big games.
I remember very clearly, I was lucky enough to go to the 2011 grand final, and everyone forgets, but Geelong were down by 2 or 3 goals, and Podsy Adley came off with a dislocated shoulder, and I think their substitute on the day was Mitch Duncan. So they brought in Duncan for Pods, but they really only had Tomahawk up forward. And everyone remembers Tomahawk coming alive after half time with those 3 goals. But Stevie J was under an injury cloud and barely ran. He'd play a good game, but Chris Scott threw Jimmy Bartell forward. And I just remember him, not just in that game, but he was such a good overhead mark for a midfielder. He took apart Collingwood's half back line of Harry O and Nick Maxwell and Ben Johnson and everyone like that. And look, he ended up winning the Norm Smith. I think it's a great pick. He wasn't he won the. He's not my pick there, but you're right. You just can't go past the goal like that.
And also, how sneaky looking was he? I mean, I think that also counts. Like if you're
the marketing element, memberships,
marketing element,
female interests. That's a great point.
If you take looks into consideration, would you take Jimmy Bartell or Jude Bolton?
Oh, shame. I think Bartell, because I'm more of the rugged look now.
Really?
Bolton's more of the even though Bolton played tough, I think he was more pretty. But yeah. So pick 5, we're on to King Smug.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I mean, there are 2 players that I'd be very happy to get at the moment. I mean, I think Dane Swan would be great value at this point, but I will go with Sam Mitchell. He's my he's 3 on the board for me, and I'll snap him up at pick 5. I think we've covered his illustrious career, but I think he really genuinely was the best player in that dynasty of a team, week in, week out, year in, year out, and had his own style of leadership that probably pissed me off as an opposition fan, but probably got his teammates to deliver on the day. So Sam Mitchell, pick 5.
It was definitely more consistent than Hodge. Like you can go to a football game and go, yeah, Hodge was taken out of it. You know, okay, he's had a few big tackles or a big bump or a spoil or whatever. But, you know, you couldn't just put a tagger on Sam Mitchell and expect something to happen. He really, I mean, so it's quite funny that he, you know, took the Brownlow, or not took, but he was the recipient of the Brownlow after Watson lost it. But he really was a slightly better version for a much longer period of time than the Joe Watsons.
And he might be a sneaky underrated champion.
Yeah.
And everyone forgets he almost did it again at West Coast in his one season there. He went to West Coast. They made the prelim in the 2017 or the semi-finals. He was pretty good, and then he was a premiership assistant coach the year after. So
it's really hard when you're doing these redrafts to look at accumulation purely on a stats basis versus impact. And I think Mitchell was definitely somebody who racked up heaps of the ball, but his impact was so damaging because he had such a good. I mean, how good was his delivery inside 50? I know that's a key measurement. He probably didn't kick a huge amount of goals, but
I was astonished. Does anyone know how many career goals he kicked for a total of 329 games?
Probably in the 100 and something.
I'd say 110.
71. He was. I couldn't believe that stat when I saw it. He had the highest. Actually,
I think that counts probably against.
He had the second highest average disposal in the draft class, just behind Dane Swan. It's amazing that he actually has accrued more average possessions per game than Gary Ablett, and we think of Gary Ablett being this 40 possession magnet, but
that's amazing stuff.
Yeah, his career possessions is 26.4, whilst Gablett's is only 25.3. Once again, possessions isn't everything, particularly in this sport. But
would you say he had an element of smug? That's maybe why I'm so drawn to him.
Yeah, I think he had a late career. I think he had a late career smug. I don't really remember him being a showboaty player. I think he was just like, hold my beer type of footballer. Like, all right, I'll come in and dominate the third quarter. I never really remember him going, they won that game because Sam Mitchell put the team on his back in the last quarter. I don't really recall that side of him, but definitely.
Yeah, and I think if you compare the guy and pick before him, like Jimmy B, 305 games, 202 goals. So clearly a much more impactful player as far as hitting the scoreboard's concerned.
So you may have lost me briefly there. My internet's not fantastic. But we
So,
will carry on.
I said, just that Jimmy B, 305 games, 202 goals.
Yeah, so it's very different, but yeah, I know I'd be very happy picking Mitchell before Bartel.
So St Kilda, Blusztein picked Jimmy Bartel with pick 5. The original pick 5 was Xavier Clark to St Kilda. Dave, what do you think the over and under of premierships for St Kilda if they had taken Jimmy Bartel instead of Xavier Clark?
To be honest, they're so bloody cursed. They probably still would have missed out.
Really?
When you think about how awfully close they got, there's more to it than just the cattle on the park. So we'll never know. That's the beauty of this. But they certainly would have been a better side. But there was just something missing, wasn't there? What do you think, Bones?
I mean, you can't replay the seasons, but if you look at that list that they had, including drafting Dowell and Luke Ball in this draft, I think you put the over and under and think about how much that would have hurt Geelong not having Bartel. I'm putting the over at 1.5 premierships.
Just briefly on Luke Ball, the longer I looked at this draft, the further he dropped down my list. Now, I'm not sure
I'm the same.
If that's a real reflection of his career, or is that just recency bias and he just retired a bit earlier? Good? But maybe he wasn't that good.
I think it was that play that was good early, and just became a decent role player towards the second, literally the second half of his career, not the back half, like the second half. I got a classic Luke Ball story when we get to him. If he actually makes the top 50.
Great PR, Ball. Great PR. Everyone seems to love him.
It's that Xavier group.
Have you picked pick 6 yet, Bones?
No, but I'm going to take.
You're going Barry Brooks. You're going Barry Brooks, aren't you?
I'm going to go. I'm going to go the highest possession accumulator in this draft, Dane Swan.
Wow.
I think he just stands out, even though he only managed 258 games. Those 211 goals, Premiership medallion, 5 All-Australian, 3 BNFs. 3 BNFs is quite remarkable, particularly in that era where he played.
Where did you have him, say?
Dane? I Dane at 9.
Really?
Wow. I had him at 4. Ahead of Luke Hodge.
I just think he's he's almost a one of one. There aren't many players that were that strong through the core and just could run all day. He literally just did anything he ever wanted on a football field. He always tore Essendon up on Anzac Day, and maybe that's what I remember a lot. But you could always count on him to deliver in big moments. He's he's basically Dustin Martin in my view, and not just because of that bad boy image that he has, but he had that ability just to go forward and kick 2 or 3 goals and change your game and tear up a midfield. And particularly when you look at that Collingwood team that they had, a lot of great, solid players like, Luke Ball or Pendlebury or Ben Johnson or even Daisy Thomas. And then you had this absolute bull that was the engine of that midfield that no one could, it was impossible to tag. I don't really remember someone going, yeah, that guy did a great job on Dane Swan today. And similar to Gary Ablett, he really only started his career, I'd say, 2006. I do remember in our fantasy team that he was like this, you got to take him in like the mid-season draft that we had because no one took him originally. He was averaging like 110 in fantasy. He was just an absolute bull. So I don't know.
He was just the best player on the field most times you watch him play. Like he just was that guy you were worried about always. And I think when it cuts through, that's when you're dealing with elite players, how do you separate them? He worried me more than a Luke Hodge did than a Bartel did. So that's why I had him at 4 ahead of those 2.
His peak was also not as long. I'd say his peak was probably 2007 to 2013. Like that's not such a long peak career, but that also timed with Collingwood's great run of that era.
Now continuing on with the Geelong theme, my pick 7 is Stevie J.
Yep.
probably my favourite player, behind Jimmy B, in that Geelong side. Just impactful, skillful, turned the game on its ear. Pick 7 for me.
He had the highest amount of career goals in this draft class, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. A nifty half forward being the highest amount of career goals with 516 on 293 games. 3-time premiership player, Norm Smith medalist in 07, and 3-time All-Australian. He was remarkable. Dave, what do you remember about him?
Oh, he was an absolute superstar at his prime. I found him one of the hardest to place in the list because could he have done any more at his position? Probably not. But was he as good as some others? I'm not sure. I mean, I
he
had
also
him at
went
pick
into
8.
the middle. Remember, there was a couple of years where he went into the middle. Remember?
He did.
He used to get like 35 sometimes and kick 4.
He was special. He probably was the full forward equivalent for this elite team that, Shaw Hawkins came on late and Cam Mooney served a purpose and Pobbs Yardley too, but he was probably the constant threat over many years. So very reasonable pick.
It's quite crazy to think that both Essendon and Collingwood turned down trade offers for him, not like for the draft, but during his career early on. And, it's just, it shows the conservative nature. Like, I think they were both worried about his...
Were you picking him at 7 Bones?
I think now that we've talked about it, you got to think about it. I actually went with someone else. I went with someone else at that particular selection.
Am I on the clock?
You are on the clock. I wonder.
Yeah, you're on the clock, Dave.
I'm very curious to see how far this guy falls, though. Where I had him at that selection.
My pick 7, who I'm now going to select at pick 8, was actually at this point he was Brian Harris.
Really? Wow. Wow. I had him sliding much further than this.
If you guys were going to pick Brian Lake, you wouldn't have got him.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got Brian Lake. Yeah.
Now, Zelman has a great affinity towards Brian Lake. He nestled him about $500 one afternoon.
That's true.
Yeah.
Look, it came to a point in the draft where I thought, how do you value the tools in this draft?
Yeah,
and he genuinely played. He played in elite teams when he was at his best. He took a while to get to his best, but when he got to his best, he went a 7, 8, 9 year period of being an elite defender in elite teams that carried over that whole span. I mean, the Bulldogs team were a whisker from being a champion team.
Yeah, he was.
And then he's won 3 flags.
Yeah, he was awesome. Actually, he was really, really probably underrated, isn't he, in the scheme of things?
I think so. And certainly when you get looking at other midfielders, etc., I think that there comes a point in the draft where you've got to pull the trigger on it all. And Brian Lake / Harris.
I mean,
King Shafira pick 9.
Yeah. So just quickly on Brian Lake there, though. I mean, I just want to
very quickly.
He was that. He was that guy that that modern day first full back that got a lot of possessions and drove the ball forward for the Western Bulldogs. Everyone forgets he did make 2 All-Australian teams as a Bulldogs defender. That's insane. Like when you stop and think about it, he was probably very underrated. At this pick,
what do you mean 2?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to take a very, very tall man in Aaron Sandilands. I know he never won anything. He never won a Brownlow or a premiership, but geez, he was unstoppable. Like if he had a team around him, he could have this career where you're saying, look, the reason why Team X won them these amount of premierships is because their midfield just got the ball every single time.
There's one problem with this, Bones. You can't pick a ruckman in the first round of a draft. We've discussed that. It's one of my theories.
It's true.
Don't do it. You pick him on the rookie list.
Well, that's exactly where Aaron Sandilands was selected. He was selected on the rookie list there. But
not by you.
4-time All-Australian, 2-time best and fairest and best and fairest in 2015, where they probably should have gone on to win the flag. I'm taking my Aaron Sandilands
one anomaly here is that a gentleman picked at pick 50 was Paul Salmon. And obviously he was at the tail end of his career at the time. But we're obviously not comparing. We're comparing it from 2001 onwards, and that's why Paul Salmon wouldn't have been picked. But if you looked at Paul Salmon's career from start to finish, he'd clearly be a top 10 player. You'd say, particularly with the lack of tools, so to speak.
We can
revisit. Ruckman are like running backs. You just don't take them early, all right?
We can revisit the 1982 draft at another time, Zell.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see that there just weren't. Dave's point is very valid. There's a real lack of good quality tools in this draft, which is funny to think. Like, there's so many amazing midfielders, generational midfielders, but the tools, they were lacking.
You're right. Joel Reynolds played a bit taller than he was, didn't he, Shay?
It was that modern day high lead up wingman.
And with that theme, is it my pick now?
No. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not, is it? Oh, it is my pick.
Yeah, it is.
I've got Nicky Dow at pick 10.
Like that.
Beautiful mover. Should have been a 2-time premiership player. Killed Carlton. Well, I guess all these players killed Carlton because we were at our worst at the time. That a lot of these players were at their peak. But beautiful footballer, and to get Hodge, Bartel, Stevie J, and Nicky Dow with my 4 picks to date, I'm pretty happy with that.
All very, very nice movers.
King Shafir.
I think I'm up next.
Just quickly on Nick Dalsano. This is why I've been ranting a little bit how the Brownlow format needs to be changed a little bit. And Nick Dalsano is a case. Would you say that in any given season, Nick Dalsano was a top 10 AFL footballer without going back specifically?
Maybe one season. I don't know which one, but maybe
2011, where St Kilda finished 6th. Nick Dalsano was a runner-up in the Brownlow, and he had a lot of top 5 finishes in the Brownlow.
I think he was St Kilda, one of St Kilda's best midfielder, second best midfielder, and they were good for a long time.
He's the perfect Brownlow type.
Yeah,
but that nifty good ball user outside. So he stands
out. A pleasure to watch with ball in hand. Yeah, and fair haired.
Is he Zach Merritt ceiling type player, would you say, or is Zach Merritt potential to surpass it?
Zach Merritt's a better tackler, so that's probably an edge that Dal didn't have. But Dal's elite. Dal's best is better.
Nick Dalsano lost how many preliminary finals? 04, 05, 08. 2014, he lost 5 preliminary finals and 2 grand finals. He was gut-wrenching. I mean, let's be honest, I don't think those North Melbourne teams we really ever believed in too much to go that far, but he was probably...
Did North make 2 prelims?
Yeah, in 14 and 15. He was,
that's a good point.
Those years were just what a wasteland. 14 and 15, like North Melbourne in the prelim.
Yeah, it was ugly final series from memory.
Yeah,
it was.
I
don't have time's running.
Yeah, we got 5 more picks.
Let's fly through. Look, I struggled with the next few, but I probably took Matty Boyd next. I think again in a very good side. He was a really, really good player over a long period of time and probably underrated. But you could put up an argument for some others at that pick.
I had him earlier in the draft. The guy is a 3-time All-Australian, which is crazy to think about. Like, you don't really think of Matthew Boyd as getting, All-Australian nominations, particularly in that era.
It's good, Shay, that you're big on All-Australians, which is I think it's a good way to look at it.
And he averaged 25 posies a game. That's the 4th highest in this thing behind Dane Swan, Mitchell, and Ablett. Like, that's higher than Hodge, Judd, Bartel, you name it. Like, it's average 25 a game.
He was probably the Bulldogs' best. He was the Bulldogs' best midfielder when they were pushing for flags.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Who are you taking next?
I'm looking at who's on my draft board that's still left. I'm going to go with Pop James Kelly. I had him just over Lee Montagna in this position. Even though Lee Montagna was probably much more damaging as a footballer, I think when you look at James Kelly's career, those 3 premierships, he was just that staple, a guy behind, the Abletts, Bartels, Chapmans, and Johnson. He was just this guy that you could depend on at halfback, classic centerman. He didn't have any real accolades. He never won a best and fairest. He never won an All-Australian, but that 15-year career, I think he was just one of the more consistent players Geelong had. And I think you got to give him a bit of a nudge. And yeah, that late season run at Essendon, one season was good and one season was pretty shit. But
and also a great leader, really good leader. Didn't lose many one-on-ones.
That's a good point.
13. Pick 13. I've gone the David Hale. The reason I've gone David Hale is because not only has he shown he's a renaissance from moving ruck to forward, but he's also shown that his hair can move from the middle to the forward line as well. So David Hale for me, also very handy player, really was. Like, and he was, Shoaib, you'd be able to confirm that he was a premiership player as well, Mr. Hale. Three-time premiership player. Always a tough matchup, very athletic. I think if you get him at pick 13 and you look back on his career, you're pretty happy.
This is why Hawthorn are geniuses, though. Like, so many people underrate quality players at oppositions. They got Brian Lake for nothing, basically for free. It was just a minor pick swap. And they got David Hale for a second rounder. The guy was a leading goal kicker at North Melbourne, still in his prime. And they're
such geniuses that they didn't draft the guys.
Yeah. But you know what they did? They let the other clubs develop them and fuck up their development and get them for cheaper.
It's amazing.
Pick 14, Davo.
Yeah, I struggled between separating Ball, Montagna, and Kelly. Kelly's gone. I'm gonna say Lee Montagna. I think he played a harder position than the inside mid role, and I think he played it really well for a very long period of time. But Luke Ball was a very good player too, so I'm not sure if I picked rightly there.
No, I think Montagna. I would have gone Montagna over Ball too.
Very good. Now for the final pick, I think I'm going to take Jared Wade. I think
very good.
I think his career was very underappreciated. He was a very gun centre halfback flanker for Carlton in a very dark era. He was probably one of the standout players that was quite dependable, a great swingman. Probably took him a bit too long to move to full forward, centre half forward. I think that really only happened once Favola was traded. And he just had this great timing and an amazing leap.
Very underrated player.
And he had this great resurgence.
Probably the most frustrating player. I reckon if you watch Joe Danaher,
great call.
You can extrapolate him out. You might get weight as far as physical attributes, athleticism. Danaher might have a bit more supreme talent, but
speaking of talent, Josh? What are your thoughts on pick 26 in the real draft? What do you think about his talent? I mean, I think he's one of the best of all time, personally, but doesn't get a mention in this draft.
Pick 26 in 2001.
Aaron Rodgers.
How did that slide through all these years?
It was a late career change that he. A couple of years later, was he at the Packers then? When did he get? When did Rodgers get drafted?
Yeah, he would have been at the Packers.
Much later. I reckon it was later.
Maybe later.
That poor bloke.
So just players that we left off that I think deserve an honourable mention. I'm not going to go through their stats, but it's Luke Ball, Carazzo, the Truck, Rutten, Clinton Khan Lynch, Marty Mattner, and was a great player. Campbell Brown was a fantastic player for a few years there. But the real sneakiness is how much West Coast cleaned up in this draft that made their premiership team. So Ashley Hansen, Mark Seavey, and Stephen Armstrong were all drafted in this draft, and didn't have great careers or even long careers, but 3 premiership players to get out of this draft as well, on top of the Chris Jones.
Can I also mention somebody who I actually had in my 15?
Yep.
Adamus Schneider.
Adam Schneider. I had him too. He was fantastic. He
was, and I think I was watching some of the old St Kilda replays on Fox Footy from, particularly the Collingwood Grand Final. He was so good, Schneider.
Yeah.
I think he went on like an 8-season run from juniors to seniors of playing in grand finals or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm happy he made the 05 team.
Fellas,
Yeah,
I love you all and leave you.
Yep. Very good. Well,
that was a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
Is there any graphics we can get up on the bottom of the screen, Shape? Just giving us, the actual picks.
Yeah,
I've got them written down.
Let me share my screen. Here's what we did. We got Hodge, Ablett, Judd, Bartel, Mitchell, Swan, Stevie J, Brian Lake or Harris, Aaron Sandilands at pick 9, who Blusztein might not have had on his draft board, Nick Dowell, Jackie Boyd, James Kelly, David Hale, Lee Montagna, and Jared White.
And Bones,
is it Jared? We've got Jared White.
Essendon didn't just do so well this draft.
We're not even.
The next
few years
we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Oh, this is. I mean,
I was just looking at Essendon's pick.
Andrew Welsh.
Yeah,
he was a handy player, but he didn't make my top 30.
Simon O'Keefe.
It's all right. We'll win a final
Reynolds.
soon, Bones. I'm not worried.
Yeah.
We'll win a final soon.
Oh God,
Joel Reynolds. Yeah.
It's
depressing.
It's crazy.
Fellas, love you both. I'll speak
hilarious.
to you both. I'm sure I'll speak to you both very soon.
Until next time.
See you.
See you guys.